The silver fork clinked against the crystal champagne flute, a sound too sharp, too deliberate to be anything but a call for attention. The chatter of 300 guests in the Grand Vista ballroom didn't so much cease as it lowered in pitch, a sea of polite curiosity turning toward the head table. From my seat, I had a perfect view. I could see the way my new mother-in-law, Lorraine Ashford, smoothed the front of her cream silk dress, a self-satisfied smile playing on her lips. I could see the way my new husband, Liam, tensed beside me, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. And I could see the way Lorraine's eyes scanned the crowd, making sure she had the floor. She didn't look at me. She rarely did, unless it was to offer a backhanded compliment that landed like a paper cut. "I just want to say a few words," Lorraine began, her voice a practiced, melodious trill that filled the vast, glass-walled space. The setting sun was painting the San Francisco skyline in hues of orange and pink, a backdrop so breathtaking it felt almost comical for the pettiness about to unfold. As the mother of the groom, and a woman who has seen her son achieve so much, I have to say, I am just so proud. She paused for effect, her gaze sweeping over the audience. I saw her sister, Deborah, nod encouragingly from a nearby table. I saw Liam's father, Richard, take a long sip of his scotch. "Liam has worked so hard to build the life he has," Lorraine continued, her voice taking on a conspiratorial, almost maternal warmth. "And it is so wonderful to see that he has finally found someone who can appreciate the world he has created. We all know he's always been one to reach for the stars, and it's a mother's joy to see him reach so high." The innuendo was as clear as the glass in my hand. She wasn't just saying he had high standards. She was telling the entire room, in a way that was deniable but unmistakable, that I had married up. That I was a lucky, perhaps slightly average, girl who had snagged a successful man. That I had contributed nothing to the life we were building, that I was merely an appreciative passenger on his coattails. Liam's hand found mine under the table, his grip apologetic but firm. He knew. He knew his mother, and he knew the silent agony she was putting me through. He'd apologize for her later, as he always did, with a weary sigh and a promise that she didn't mean it like that. But the words would hang in the air, poisoning what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I didn't flinch. I didn't look down, or turn red, or give her the satisfaction of a reaction. I just smiled a small, placid smile, the kind that reveals nothing and holds everything in reserve. I let my gaze drift past her, past the smug faces of her friends, to the soaring arches of the ceiling above, the intricate, gravity-defying sweep of the glass and steel that created this very room. Lorraine finished her toast, raising her glass to a round of scattered, somewhat bewildered applause. She had successfully done what she'd set out to do. She had marked her territory and diminished me in front of everyone who mattered. She didn't know, of course. She had never bothered to ask. She had never been interested in anything I did, only in what I represented for her son. She had no idea that she had just insulted the person who had, quite literally, designed the very ceiling she was standing under. Before I go on, tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now. I read every single one. I let the moment settle. I let the toasts from other, more sincere guests wash over me. I watched as the band struck up a gentle waltz and Liam's father finally pulled his wife onto the dance floor, a transactional gesture of propriety. But I was done being part of the performance. I was done letting her be the director of my narrative. When the best man, a childhood friend of Liam's named Mark, stood up to give his toast, he looked over at me with a warm, conspiratorial smile. He was one of the few people in the room who knew the whole truth. He'd been there when Liam and I first met at a university mixer where I was presenting a project. "So, I've known Liam since we were 5 years old," Mark began, his voice easy and natural. "I've seen him fall out of trees, strike out in Little League, and make some truly questionable decisions with his hair. I've also seen him fall in love." He winked at us. "But here's something you might not know about this man. He is, and always has been, absolutely terrified of heights." A few people laughed. "Imagine my surprise then," Mark continued, "when he calls me up, about 2 years ago, and tells me he's finally going to ask his girlfriend, Mira, to move in with him. I say, great, buddy. Are you getting a place on the ground floor, maybe a nice garden-level apartment? And he says, no, man. I'm going to ask her to move into a penthouse. More laughter, this time directed at Liam. I saw him shake his head, a genuine smile finally gracing his handsome face. And I was so confused, Mark went on. I said, but Liam, you hate heights. Why would you want to live on the 40th floor of a building? And do you know what he said to me? Mark paused, his eyes glinting with mischief. He was a real estate lawyer. He knew. He said, Mark, I don't want to live in the building. I want to live with her. The building is just the thing that makes the view worth seeing. It was a sweet sentiment, and the guests saw it appreciatively. Lorraine even clapped, a little too enthusiastically, as if she was responsible for her son's romantic poetry. I felt a flicker of warmth in my chest. Liam had his flaws, his biggest one sitting a few chairs away from him, but his heart was good. He saw me. And then, Mark said, his voice becoming a little more formal, a little more significant. I asked him what the new building was. I was curious, as a real estate guy. And he told me. And the moment he said the name, I immediately knew. I knew the story behind it. He turned to face me fully, his voice dropping its jocularity and becoming sincere. You see, guests, this is our city. It's a city of dreamers and builders. And some of us, we just live in the buildings. But a very few of us, we create them. We give them their soul, their sense of place. Lorraine's smile was starting to look a little brittle. The focus of the toast had shifted. Mira here, Mark said, gesturing to me with his champagne flute, has been with this project from its very conception. She didn't just see the plans. She saw the vision. She fought for the sustainability requirements. She personally oversaw the structural integrity of the cantilever design that makes this room feel like it's floating in the air. A few of the guests started to look around, a dawning realization creeping onto their faces. They looked at the soaring glass, the impossible angles of the roof above them. They looked from the ceiling to me, the quiet bride in the simple but elegant silk gown, and they began to connect the dots. So, when I stand here today, Mark concluded, raising his glass high, to toast the happy couple, I want to toast to Liam for having the good sense to marry a woman who could literally design a building to be the best possible version of itself, and to Mira, who did exactly that with this one. He took a deep breath, his smile beaming. To the lead architect of the Archimedes Tower, the woman who designed this very ballroom. To Mira, may your life together be built on foundations just as strong. The silence that followed was thick with shock. It lasted for only a second, maybe two, before the room erupted in a wave of genuine, enthusiastic applause and cheers. It was loud, it was real, and it was absolutely devastating for one person in the room. Lorraine Ashford looked as if she had been slapped. The smug, superior smile was gone, replaced by a mask of frozen, bloodless shock. Her lips were slightly parted, her eyes wide. She was in the middle of a room she had just publicly declared the bride wasn't good enough for, and the bride had just been revealed as its creator. The architect. The person whose name was probably on a plaque somewhere in the lobby. The person who had shaped the very venue she had chosen to host her son's wedding as a final display of her own social dominance. She had chosen this room because it was the most prestigious in the city. She had wanted to show her friends, her family, how successful her son was for being able to afford it. It was her crowning jewel in the display of our unequal union. And now she knew. We hadn't just booked the venue. I had designed it, the whole damn thing. And I had done it 2 years before I even knew her son. The moment was delicious. Poetic justice, served on a silver platter. Liam squeezed my hand under the table, his eyes wide. He knew about my work, of course. He knew my title, my reputation. But he hadn't known Mark was going to do that. He hadn't known that my revenge would be served so coldly and so publicly. I simply raised my champagne glass in a silent toast to Mark, and then, very slowly, I turned to look at Lorraine. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just met her gaze, a look of quiet, understated calm on my face. I raised my glass to her, a single, almost imperceptible movement, a silent acknowledgement of the truth that had just been revealed. She knew exactly what I was saying without a single word. I built this. My money helped build this. The title you never bothered to ask about is the title that owns the room you're in. She turned away first, a ghastly shade of white, reaching for her champagne glass with a trembling hand. She didn't drink it. She just held it, staring at the bubbles, the silence in her own head so much louder than the happy chatter of the crowd around her. The night went on. The band played, the cake was cut, and the finality of it all set in. I wasn't just a new member of the Ashford family. I had just become a force they couldn't ignore. It's funny, looking back. Funny isn't the right word. Insightful is better. The moment Mark said it, the word architect landing like a bomb in the middle of the reception, it wasn't just about showing up Lorraine. It was the culmination of years of a quiet, systemic underestimation that I had absorbed, processed, and filed away like blueprints for a monument. My own mother, a gentle woman who always believed in being gracious, would have called it a trial by fire. My father, a stoic engineer who taught me how to read a structural load chart before I could ride a bike, would have called it the price of being exceptional. They were both right, but they were also both people who had never had to explain their intrinsic value to a woman like Lorraine Ashford. My history with Lorraine began the moment Liam introduced us. It was a small, tense dinner at their sprawling Marin County home, a place that looked like it had been decorated by a professional who had never met an actual person. Everything was beige, cream, and gold. I felt like I was walking into a hotel lobby. I had just won a prestigious award for a sustainable housing project in the Tenderloin. I was riding high. I was proud. I walked into that house full of confidence. "So," Lorraine had said, her eyes scanning me with the cool detachment of a shopper appraising a handbag, "Liam tells me you're in design?" "Architecture," I said, smiling. "I work at Foster and Partners." "Oh," she'd said, her tone brightening slightly. "How lovely. Do you do interiors?" "I'm thinking of having the guest bathroom redone." A simple question. A simple misunderstanding. I could have let it slide. But something in her tone, the way she dismissed my entire profession as something frivolous, something decorative, had sparked a quiet ember of defiance in me. "No," I'd said, still smiling, but my voice taking on a slightly harder edge. "I do buildings. Commercial, residential, and public works. The Tenderloin housing project? That was mine." Her smile had faltered. The Tenderloin project was famous. It had been on the cover of architectural magazines. It had transformed a blighted area. But a self-respecting woman like Lorraine Ashford probably didn't read architectural magazines, and she certainly didn't see the Tenderloin as anything but a blight. "Oh," she said again, the single syllable utterly flat. How civic-minded. That was the first small cut. The dismissal of my life's work as a charitable hobby. It was subtle, easily shrugged off, and so it was. I shrugged it off. Liam drove me home, apologizing for his mother's old-fashioned views. That was the pattern. The job I did was never acknowledged, only accommodated. "Mira, we'd love to have you at the lake house for the 4th of July, but we know you have those work commitments." Work commitments. As if I were freelancer doing data entry, not the lead architect on a multi-million-dollar skyscraper. When Liam and I got engaged, the wedding planning began in earnest. Or rather, Lorraine's wedding planning began. I had wanted something small, intimate, maybe in the garden of a friend's house in the Mission. A celebration, not a performance. "Nonsense, darling," Lorraine had trilled when I'd meekly suggested it. "Liam is a partner at his firm. We have to project the right image. This isn't just about you two, it's a celebration of our family's standing. We'll do it properly. I'll take care of everything." And she did. She took care of everything. She chose the menu, the flowers, the music, the color scheme. She chose her dress, which cost more than a car, and made sure I understood how generous she was being by allowing me to choose my own. Whenever I'd try to push back, she'd pat my hand. "Oh, you're under so much stress with your little projects. Let me handle this. It's my gift to you." In her mind, she was being magnanimous. In her mind, she was giving a poor little architect a magical fairy tale wedding. In her mind, I was the Cinderella who had somehow managed to snare her prince. The gift wasn't the wedding. The gift was her. It was a gift I never asked for, and a narrative I never agreed to. The result was a wedding that cost more than most people's houses, a celebration she had curated to reflect her tastes, her status, and her family's wealth, all of which she assumed was solely her son's doing. She never asked who was paying for the venue. She never asked how we could afford it. She just assumed. She assumed Liam was putting up the money, pulling from the trust his grandfather had established, or getting a loan from his father's business. She didn't ask because it didn't occur to her that I might be the one footing the bill. And that's where the biggest part of the secret lay. Liam and we don't talk about money in a way that matters to her. It's a private thing. He has his success, and I have mine. But here's the part Lorraine never would have guessed. I make more than twice what Liam does. My salary, my bonuses, my seniority in one of the most prestigious firms in the country meant I was the one who put down the deposit on this spectacular venue. It was my name on the contract. She had no idea. And why would she? It didn't fit her narrative. In her world, women were support systems, not load-bearing walls. The first major escalation happened about 6 months before the wedding. We were at another of her small dinner parties, a gathering of her most important friends and a few of Liam's colleagues. I was seated next to a charming, older gentleman named Harold, a friend of Lorraine's from some country club she frequented. "So, I hear you're the lucky lady," he'd said, smiling. "Liam's a fine young man. He's going places." "Thank you," I'd replied, feeling the familiar drill of this kind of conversation. "He is." "And what do you do with yourself, my dear?" he'd asked. "Any hobbies?" I could feel Lorraine across the table, her ears practically pricked. She was watching to see how I'd answer, waiting for me to confirm her low expectations. So, instead of saying, "I'm an architect," which I normally would have, I decided to have a little fun. "I'm currently working on a very exciting project," I said. "We're attempting to create a more human-centric design approach for high-density urban living. It's a structural challenge, but very rewarding. I spend a lot of my time looking at load-bearing walls and worrying about seismic safety. It's not for everyone." Harold had looked utterly baffled. He'd blinked, clearly expecting me to say something like tennis or yoga. But before he could recover, Lorraine swooped in like a social first responder. "Oh, Harold, she's being so modest," she'd said, laughing a tinkling, dismissive laugh. "She's an architect. She draws pictures of buildings. Such a creative soul. Draws pictures of buildings." I felt the words like a slap. Not just a dismissal, but a humiliation. In front of her friends, in front of Liam's boss, she had just reduced my entire career to the work of a hobbyist. She wasn't just ignoring my accomplishments, she was actively erasing them. Liam, seated beside me, had frozen. He was so used to his mother's behavior that his default response was to shut down, to pretend he hadn't heard it. But I saw it. I saw the silence he chose over defense. It's not that he doesn't love me, it's that he was conditioned from birth not to challenge her. He was a good man trapped in a bad dynamic. That was my first real sign. That he wouldn't be the knight in shining armor. He'd be a witness, but he wouldn't be a fighter. If I was going to be respected in this family, I was going to have to earn that respect myself. I was going to have to pick my moment, and I was going to have to make it count. I stopped expecting Liam to rescue me. I stopped hoping Lorraine would change. I started planning. If you've ever had someone in your own family underestimate you like this, drop a comment. I want to hear your story too. The second escalation was at the engagement party. She had rented out a private room at a restaurant in the city, a place with a breathtaking view of the Bay Bridge. It was her territory, her choice, her opportunity to show me off to her friends as her son's future wife. She gave a speech, and it was a masterpiece of passive aggression. "Liam has always had such a strong sense of purpose," she'd said, her voice dripping with motherly pride. "Ever since he was a little boy, he knew exactly what he wanted. And he's always been so driven. He knew he'd be successful, that he'd find a way to make his mark on the world. And now he's brought home this beautiful young woman, and we're all so excited to welcome her into our family. She turned to look directly at me. Her eyes were warm, but her tone was anything but. It's so wonderful that he's found someone to settle down with. A sweet, supportive partner who can help him build a home. It was that word again. Help. She was so careful never to say I built anything of my own. I was just a helping hand on his grand project. The subtext was clear. I was the comfort. He was the success. She presented me with a wedding gift. It was a set of vintage silver serving spoons. They were lovely, incredibly ornate. As she placed them in my hands, she said, loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear, "These were my grandmother's." She used them to serve tea at all of her important charity events. I know a modern girl like you probably won't use them, but I thought they might be nice to have on a shelf, as a reminder of the heritage of our family. It was a gift designed to put me in my place, to remind me that I was marrying into a dynasty and that I was an accessory to their legacy, not a creator of my own. It was a gift that said, "This is our history, our culture. You're welcome to look at it, but you'll never be part of creating it." That was the moment I decided not just to endure, but to prepare. I started planning something. I wasn't sure exactly what, but I was creating a design in my head, a structure of my own making, where the only final reveal would be my own truth. I started by making sure my voice was heard in the wedding planning, but not directly. I didn't confront her. I just offered solutions that she would think were her own. I subtly guided her toward the Archimedes Tower. I had contacts there. I knew the director of events. I told her a friend could get us a deal. When she got a quote that was significantly less than the market rate because of my professional influence, she thought it was her superior negotiating skills. "You see," she'd said to me, beaming, "it always pays to have connections. I knew I could make this work. This is the place for a wedding like this. It sets the right tone." She was so proud of herself. She had no idea that the only reason she was standing in the most beautiful room in the city was because of me. The third escalation happened on the day of the rehearsal dinner. We were at the hotel, ironing out the final details. My mother was on video call from the East Coast, helping me with the seating arrangements, a delicate art that Lorraine had left entirely to the vendors. Lorraine walked into the suite unannounced, as she always did. She saw me on the iPad with my mother, and her face flickered with annoyance. "Oh, we're still working on that," she'd said, waving a dismissive hand. I told the planner to just put the family together. It's so much simpler. People don't care where they sit as long as they have a good view. My mother and I were just fine-tuning, I said, keeping my voice calm. It's the one thing I wanted to take care of. Lorraine had huffed. "Darling, you're too nervous about all of this. It's just a party. The important thing is that everyone sees how happy you two are." And then she saw it. My mother's face on the screen. "And I see you've got your mother on the phone. Are you sure you wouldn't rather be with your own family tonight? I know it's hard being so far from home." It was a dagger, delivered with the sweetest smile. She was telling my mother on my wedding day that she was an afterthought, that I was being absorbed into Lorraine's world, and that my own family was a distraction. My mother, who has the patience of a saint, just smiled and said, "I'm just happy to be part of the day, no matter how I can help." But it was the last straw. It was one thing to diminish me. It was another to diminish my mother, to treat my own family as an inconvenience. I had been quiet for years. I had been the polite, accommodating future daughter-in-law. But in that moment, I was done. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just went quiet. I calmly finished the seating arrangements with my mother, thanked her, and closed the iPad. I spent the rest of the day in a state of cool, detached clarity. I had been absorbing her poison for months, but now I knew. My silence was over. The reveal was coming. The question was, how? How could I drop the truth on her without stooping to her level? How could I make her realize what she had done, what she had dismissed, without throwing a tantrum and proving her right about me being an emotional liability? I realized the answer was simple. I just had to let her own assumptions hang her. I slipped into the ballroom early, while the catering staff was setting up. The room was empty and quiet, the setting sun throwing long, cool shadows across the polished floor. I walked to the center of the room and looked up. The Archimedes Tower was my project. It was my legacy. It was the city's newest landmark. It was my way of saying I built this. When Mark stood up to give his toast, I knew exactly what he was going to say. He was the only person who knew everything. He was the only person who saw the whole design, the whole plan from the very beginning. He was my secret weapon. He hadn't known what Lorraine had said about me, but I had quietly told him the day before about her married-up comment. I told him with a shrug and a wry smile, but the message was clear. I'm done letting her define the narrative. Please, use your speech to help me write my own. And he had. He had done it with surgical precision. He didn't just reveal my title, he revealed the context. He made sure to emphasize that she designed this very ballroom part. He made sure that the weight of his words would land directly on the smug, superior face of my mother-in-law. He knew, as well as I did, that the truth is the most powerful weapon you can ever wield, and that the best revenge is always a life well-lived and a fact well-spoken. Lorraine had just learned that her cruel, condescending speech was delivered in a room that belonged to me. The reception continued. The cake was cut, the champagne was drunk, and the DJ played a set that made even Lorraine's stodgy old friends tap their feet. Liam's father, Richard, even came over and gave me a warm, genuine hug, whispering, "I always knew you were more than you let on, Mira. She's just a force of nature. Don't let her get to you." It was the closest he'd ever come to acknowledging his wife's behavior. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. Lorraine herself was a ghost at her own party. She was smiling, still performing her role as the matriarch, but the warmth had gone out of it. She was going through the motions. She was in shock. She couldn't look at me. She came over to me near the end of the night, her face flushed with the effort of maintaining her composure. Her voice was a low, tight whisper. "So, you're an architect." It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. "Yes, Lorraine," I said, my voice as calm as still water. "I am. I told you that when we first met." "You never mentioned this building," she said, her eyes darting around the room, as if seeing it for the first time. As if it was a threat. "You never asked," I said simply. "You were very busy planning the wedding." She stared at me, her eyes narrowing. I could see the wheels turning in her head. She was trying to fit this new information into her worldview. It didn't fit. It was a puzzle piece from a completely different box. "And you let Mark make a spectacle of it?" she hissed. It was so uncouth. "Was it?" I said, tilting my head. "I found it lovely. It's nice to be acknowledged for your work. I know you understand that, given how much you love to talk about the family's heritage." It was the first time I'd ever outright challenged her. I saw the shock in her eyes. The fact that I wasn't cowering, that I was standing my ground, was more unsettling to her than the revelation itself. "You must think you're very clever," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "I don't think that," I said, shaking my head. "I know it. I have the blueprints to prove it." I didn't walk away. I just turned to talk to a friend who had come up to congratulate me. The conversation was over. The power shift was complete. The honeymoon was a blissful 2 weeks in the Maldives, a beautiful bubble away from the drama. But when we returned, the fallout was waiting for us. Lorraine had called Liam 3 times while we were away. We'd ignored the first 2. On the third, he'd finally answered, and I'd listened to half of the conversation from the balcony. It was a mix of accusations. She did it to humiliate me, demands, you need to explain to her that she was out of line, and, finally, a sullen, wounded silence when Liam refused to take the bait. "Mom, she didn't do anything," he'd said, his voice tired. "Mark did. And all he did was tell the truth. You just never bothered to ask. You never listened. This isn't her fault. It's yours." The line went dead. The silence was a victory I didn't even need to fight for. The weeks and months that followed were a slow, cautious thaw. Lorraine didn't apologize. That wasn't her way. But the dynamic had irrevocably changed. The subtle digs stopped. The backhanded compliments ceased. She was wary of me now. She saw me not as a passive accessory to her son's life, but as a force in my own right, one that could, and had, made her look foolish. My relationship with Liam deepened. The first few weeks after the wedding were hard. He had been forced to see his mother in a new light, and it had shaken him. But we talked about it, openly and honestly. He apologized for not standing up for me sooner, for letting the narrative take hold. I didn't realize how bad it was, he said one night, sitting on the couch, his head in his hands. I mean, I knew she was difficult, but I didn't see the way she made you feel. I tuned her out. It was easier. I know, I said, taking his hand. I understand. It's hard to break a pattern you've grown up with. And I didn't really explain it to you. I just absorbed it. That's not your fault, he said, looking at me with a new kind of respect in his eyes. You shouldn't have to explain your value to anyone. It should be obvious. Sometimes it isn't, I said. Sometimes you have to prove it, but you shouldn't have to prove it to the person who's supposed to love you. He held my hand tightly. He understood. The dynamic between him and his mother didn't magically fix itself, but he was more aware of it now. He was more protective, more willing to call her out. It was a slow process, but it was a start. Richard, for his part, became a surprisingly strong ally. He'd always been a quiet man, deferring to his wife's social command. But after the wedding, he began seeking me out at family functions. He'd ask about my projects, my designs, the engineering challenges. He genuinely wanted to understand. He'd been a civil engineer once, a long time ago, before he'd retired and let his wife run the show. We connected on a professional level he'd been missing for decades. You know, he said to me one afternoon at a painful family barbecue, I used to design bridges. I was pretty good at it. But your work, it's on a whole other level. You're building the future, Mira. Lorraine just doesn't understand people like us. People who actually create things. She only knows how to consume them. It was the most profound compliment I'd ever received, and it came from the unlikeliest source. It was a sign that the truth was spreading, that my identity was no longer being hidden, but celebrated. The final piece of the puzzle came a year after the wedding. I was promoted to senior partner at the firm. It was a huge deal, a career milestone that would have been impossible to imagine a few years earlier. I called Liam, ecstatic. He was over the moon. We have to have a party, he said. We have to celebrate. I don't need a party, I laughed. No, he said, his voice serious. I need a party. To make a point. And so we did. We hosted a small, elegant dinner at a restaurant in the city, and we invited his family. It was a chance for a fresh start, for me to be celebrated, not just as a wife, but as a professional. Lorraine and Richard came. Lorraine was reserved, but not hostile. She'd been polite, if distant, ever since the wedding. It wasn't warmth, but it was at least a lack of open hostility. She sat across from me, watching me with a wary, analytical eye. At the end of the night, after the champagne was poured, Liam raised his glass for a toast. I just want to say something, he began, looking at me with such adoration in his eyes that I felt my heart swell. A few years ago, I didn't understand what it meant to be partnered with someone like Mira. I'm not just talking about emotionally. I'm talking about professionally. She's achieved more than most people will in a lifetime. And for a long time, I was okay with people not knowing that. I was okay with her being underestimated because I knew who she really was. And I guess I didn't think it mattered that other people didn't know. He turned to look at his mother, his gaze steady and clear. But it did matter. It matters because when you disrespect her work, you disrespect her. And when you disrespect her, you disrespect me. So, I want to publicly congratulate her, for the first time in a setting like this, on becoming the newest senior partner at Foster and Partners. It's the highest honor in her field, and she deserves every bit of it. The table erupted in applause. Richard was beaming. Even Lorraine, after a moment of stunned silence, raised her glass. She said, her voice a little stiff, a little forced, but with a new edge of genuine respect in it. Congratulations, Mira. I suppose I never realized how important your work was to you. It wasn't a full surrender, but it was an armistice. It was a recognition. I'd found my voice, and I'd used it to build a life that was so impressive, so undeniable, that even my biggest critic was forced to give me my due. The lesson I learned from all of this isn't about revenge. It's about the power of being underestimated. It's the luxury of being a sleeper agent in your own life. For years, I was the quiet daughter-in-law, the supportive partner, the little woman who drew pictures of buildings. And all the while, I was building the things that would ultimately define me. I learned that you don't have to shout to be heard. You don't have to prove your worth in a single argument. You prove it with the cumulative weight of your accomplishments. You prove it by being undeniable. I could have fought back against Lorraine from the first day. I could have screamed, demanded respect, and made a scene. But that would have been her game. That would have been fighting on her turf, with her rules. I chose to build my own arena. I chose to create a life so fully realized, a legacy so substantial, that my truth would become the only story that mattered. The truth is, the world is full of people like Lorraine. People who are so blinded by their own narratives, their own prejudices, that they can't see the truth in front of them. They see what they want to see. They see a pretty face, a supportive spouse, and they dismiss everything else. And the world is full of people like me. The quiet ones. The ones who are building empires while no one is looking. The ones whose value is hidden in plain sight. The revenge isn't in the reveal. The revenge is in the fact that the reveal was inevitable. It was always going to happen. The truth was just waiting for the right moment to come out. Stay with me, because what happens next is the part everyone in the comments always says they didn't see coming. And if you're new here, hit subscribe now so you don't miss how this ends. It's been 5 years now. I'm a mother of 2, a little girl named Chloe and a boy named Ethan. My career has never been better. I'm a named partner now, and my portfolio of iconic buildings is a testament to a life of passion and purpose. I'm not just an architect. I'm an institution. And Lorraine? She's manageable. She's a wonderful grandmother, to be fair. She dotes on her grandchildren, and she's softened considerably in her old age. She still says things that make me wince, but she catches herself now. She's learned, in her own way, that I am not to be trifled with. Our relationship is civil, even affectionate, in a guarded sort of way. But the most important change wasn't in her. It was in me. I no longer seek her approval. I no longer care what she thinks. Her opinion of me is irrelevant to my sense of self-worth. I've built that foundation myself, brick by brick, beam by beam. The funny thing is, the wedding reveal wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. It was the moment I realized I didn't have to be a supporting character in my own life. I could be the architect of my own narrative, the designer of my own future. The scars of those early years of dismissiveness are still there. They're a part of me. They made me who I am. They sharpened my ambition, clarified my values, and taught me the power of restraint. I learned that when you're building something monumental, you don't waste time defending the scaffolding. You just keep building until the monument stands on its own. A year ago, I completed my magnum opus, a soaring, sustainable, mixed-use development that has been hailed as a masterpiece. The opening was a major civic event. The mayor gave a speech. The media was there. And in the middle of the crowd, I saw Lorraine. She was looking up at the building, her face a mixture of pride and something I'd never seen before, a quiet, unspoken awe. The grand lobby featured a permanent plaque dedicated to the architects and visionaries behind the project. And at the very top of the list, in bold, clear letters, Mira Chinashford, lead architect. I walked up to her after the ceremony. She was with Richard, who was beaming. "It's incredible, Mira," Richard said, shaking my hand. "It's the most beautiful building in the city, maybe in the country." "Thank you, Richard," I said, genuinely touched. Lorraine was quiet. She didn't speak for a long moment. Then, she turned to me, her eyes glistening. She took a deep breath, and for the first time, there was no performance, no pretense. "I was wrong," she said. The words came out of her mouth like they were pieces of gravel. "I was wrong about you. From the very beginning. I saw a woman, and I failed to see the person. I'm sorry." It was the first apology. It was the first time she had ever truly acknowledged me. It was a small moment, but a monumental one. The fortress she had built around her own superiority had finally cracked. I smiled, and I placed my hand on her arm. Thank you, Lorraine. I know it's not easy to say that. I appreciate it. The moment was brief, but it was a bridge. We didn't become best friends. The history was too complicated. But we had finally reached a place of mutual, if begrudging, respect. So when I think back to that moment, the moment Mark revealed my secret at my own wedding, I don't feel anger. I don't feel triumph. I just feel a deep, profound sense of rightness. It was the moment I stopped being a ghost in my own story. It was the moment I stopped asking for permission to be great. And I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to make a scene. I just needed to exist, fully and unequivocally, in my own truth. The truth doesn't need you to defend it. It only needs you to live it. Comment below with one word for how you're feeling right now. I want to see them all. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It's a story about secrets, about the power of being underestimated, and about the quiet revenge of simply being who you are. I hope it resonated with you. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now. I truly do read every single one, and your stories are what make this community so special. And share below which part hit you hardest. Was it the moment of the reveal? The slow burn of the disrespect? I want to hear it all. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications. I've got a new story coming out next week that I think you're going to love, and you won't want to miss it. There's a whole world of stories out there, and I'm so honored that you're spending some of your precious time with me today. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and never let anyone else write the story of your life. You are the author of your own masterpiece.